نحمده ونصلي على رسوله الكريم أما بعد. Tonight we will commence Surah Al-Anfal, which begins in the last quarter of the 9th juz and goes well into the 10th juz. So we will be reciting the last quarter of the 9th and we'll be completing the 10th juz today, inshallah. Surah Al-Anfal. Anfal is plural of nafl, which literally means something extra. And in this context, it relates to a certain aspect of war or jihad in which there are some things that are brought in to the public treasury as spoils of war, but they are not a part of the main distribution of the spoils of war. But before we talk about this, let's talk a little bit more about the surah in general. This surah was revealed shortly after the Battle of Badr. And as you know, the Battle of Badr was the first major armed encounter that the Muslims engaged in. So this surah was revealed soon after that. Reference was made to the Battle of Badr earlier also. وَلَقَدْ نَصَرَكُمُ اللَّهُ بِبَدْرٍ وَأَنْتُمْ أَذِلَّةٌ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala helped you on the occasion of Badr when you were insignificant in number and in strength. So the background of this battle is that after the Muslims had migrated, the Quraysh were looking at what losses they had incurred after the migration. First, they persecuted the Muslims for 13 years and they boycotted them. They had them undergo all kinds of severe conditions. And when the Muslims migrated, they received news that the Muslims have prospered. They are prospering, they're doing very well, and Islam is spreading. In the meantime, the condition of the people of Makkah got from bad to worse. Their economic condition and even their health and their supply of food, everything came seemingly to a halt. And so, in the meantime, the Muslims are settling down in Medina and everyone is happy, everyone is doing well. The Prophet ﷺ, upon settling in Medina, had gathered all the residents of Medina. And Medina at that time consisted of various groups. So you had the original, you can say, indigenous Arabs that were the people of that land. Then you had Jews who had been living there for the last few centuries. So they were also very old, and basically they were original residents of that land as well. Then you had a few pockets of Christians, and then the Muslims, those people of Medina that had converted to Islam, and those Muslims that had migrated from Makkah to Medina. So this is sort of what the demographics looked like. The Prophet ﷺ, even though he was agreed upon as the leader, as the ruler of this state, he sat down with everyone and made a pact. So he did not go on this mission of either you convert to Islam or you will be killed or you will be expelled. There was no such thing. He got everyone together and said, look, we all are going to live here peacefully. Let's agree to some terms. So the first term was that all of the parties that are living there pledge to look out for the interests of this city-state. Essentially, that's what Medina had become. It had become a city-state. Everyone is going to pledge their commitment to protecting this state, which means that if anyone tries to harm the state, everyone is going to get together and oppose that and fight it and repel those forces. At the same time, no one from the residents of Medina is going to partner up with people that want to harm Medina. So this would be considered an act of treason, just like it would in any country if you were to partner up with a group to empower them to facilitate their attacking your country, then this is an act of treason. So this was also laid out, that none of us will support anyone who tries to harm us. The third thing was that if the Muslims engage in a battle that is of a religious nature, in other words, they get into a conflict, and the nature of that conflict is not an attack on Medina or the residents of Medina, but rather it is the Muslims, then the non-Muslims of Medina do not need to participate in any such conflict. They are not going to be recruited. They're not going to be told that, yes, you must come, it's war. No, if it's an issue pertaining specifically to the Muslims, then it's only the Muslims that will be involved in that. They will be the ones that are asked to come and deal with the issue. The fourth thing was that all the residents of Medina are equal in terms of their status as a citizen. One will not have preference over the other, and in the words of that document that was drafted, largely referred to as the Constitution of Medina, the protection of Allah is equally deserved by everyone. So these were some general terms that were agreed to. Now, news of these developments reaches Mecca from time to time, and the people are thinking that, we weren't able to wipe them out. And now they're getting stronger and stronger, and they have the support of all the neighboring areas. And as you know, people had started slowly, gradually coming into Islam, coming into Medina to learn about this religion, and people were migrating from different areas of the Arab regions. The Quraysh said that we need to go and attack these people. We need to do something. What should we do? They said, well, first we are not doing well financially. Let's get together some resources. So an expedition, a trade expedition, was prepared in which everyone in Mecca was asked to invest. And this trade expedition was in the form of a caravan that is going to go from Mecca to Sham, Syria, where they used to go regularly anyways, but this time everyone's going to invest heavily in it. And this trade expedition is going to go, this caravan is going to go and conduct trade over there and earn some big profits, and they're going to bring those back, and all of these profits then are going to be channeled towards building a huge army that is going to go and march to Medina and wipe the Muslims out. The Prophet ﷺ received news of this, and that this trade expedition is now on its way back under the leadership of Abu Sufyan. The Prophet ﷺ told the Sahaba that this is what is happening. We need to intercept this caravan before it gets back, and such an army is prepared that we are put in serious danger. So he called the Sahaba and said, let's talk about this. So he made mashwara with them that, look, this is the situation, what should we do? So Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, Umar radiallahu anhu, right away they said, O Prophet of Allah, we are ready, let's go and address this. So he, almost as if they hadn't said anything, he started the mashwara all over again. And again they gave their opinions. And again he started the mashwara all over again, presented the facts, asked for the opinion. So then the Sahaba understood that the Prophet ﷺ actually is consulting the Ansar. He wants the Ansar to speak out. And the reason why he wants them to speak out is to see that are they committed to the Nusra, Ansar from Nusra, the helpers, are they committed to helping Islam and the Muslims only in Medina, or are they willing to step out of Medina? So this is when the Sahaba radiallahu anhum from the Ansar spoke out, and they said some very powerful words. He said, O Prophet of Allah, you travel wherever you want and stay wherever you want, join ties with whom you want, sever ties with whom you want, and take from our wealth what you want and leave what you want. What you take from us is more beloved to us than what you leave for us. And wallahi, if right now you tell us to march into the plains of Yemen, we are ready to march with you right now. And if you tell us to march towards the ocean and plunge to the ocean, we are ready to do that as well. So these historic words were said by the Sahaba from the Ansar, and then the Prophet ﷺ said, okay, let us go, and the mission is to intercept this caravan. There was no great recruitment effort, there was no great call to arms or anything like that. It was just whoever was available, whoever got news of it, they got together, and it was not even an obligation that everyone must go. So all in all, there were some 313 Sahaba that volunteered to do this. In the meantime, the spies conveyed this news to Abu Sufyan that this discussion is happening in Medina. He sent a message back to Makkah that this is taking place. They said, okay, fine, we're going to settle this now. So they sent an army of 1,000 strong to march towards Medina. And these two groups, they met at a place called Badr. Badr is actually named after a well in this area, in this settlement. It was actually a well that was called the Well of Badr, and because of that, the settlement around that area became Badr. It's about 120 kilometers out of Medina. So, now the Sahaba were not, A, they were not trained in battle, B, they were not prepared for battle. They were just thinking, we're going to intercept these people and there will be enough of us to sort it out, and then we'll do whatever Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam asks us to do. The next thing they know, they're up against this massive army. Now, the details of this battle are laid out in this surah. And to summarize, there were 313 that had almost no armor. From amongst them, they probably had one horse. They had about 7 swords between all of them, and they had some 4 or 5 camels. The rest of them were carrying sticks. They were carrying sticks and staffs. And the army that had come from Makkah, they were fully equipped, swords, armor, whatever weaponry was available at that time. So, the Prophet ﷺ spent that night, the night before the battle, in dua. And one of the things he said was, Allahumma in tahlik hadhihi al-isabah lan tu'bad. Oh Allah, if this small band of people is destroyed, is crushed tomorrow in battle, then there's not going to be anyone to worship you. This is how he appealed to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah was going to worship you. If this group, the most dedicated people, are destroyed and are ruined. So he spent that night in dua, and he appealed to the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Ya Hayyu Ya Qayyum bi rahmatika astaghith. He made so much dua that his mantle fell off of his shoulders. Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu was there. He said, O Prophet of Allah, enough. You've made enough dua. Allah will help us. That morning the Prophet ﷺ set out, and he pointed to different spots on the battlefield. Hada masra'u fulan, hada masra'u fulan, hada masra'u fulan. This is where so-and-so, such and such enemy of Allah is going to fall and die. This is where so-and-so is going to die. This is where so-and-so is going to die. When the armies came face to face, something very interesting happened. One thing is that the Muslims started feeling sleepy. So there they are, ready to go into battle, and all of a sudden everyone gets drowsy. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala explains this. This was a sense of calm and tranquility that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala descended on them to calm their nerves and to diminish the feeling of fear and fright and panic. So a person who is in a state of panic cannot fall asleep. That's the last thing that'll be on their mind. But there the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, إِذْ يُغَشِّيكُمُ النُّعَاسَ أَمَنَةً مِّنْهُ. It was a source of peace and tranquility. The second thing that happened is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent rain. Now, this rain did some very interesting things. The first thing is that the land that the Muslims were on, that ground that they were on, it became more firmly packed down because of that rain. And the ground that the Quraysh, the people of Makkah had chosen, it became muddy. So this rain had this effect. So their ground got more firmly packed down, their ground got slippery and muddy, and Sahaba radiallahu anhum, they engaged. And the way the engagement used to happen at that time is that the bravest from each side would challenge someone from the other side, and there would be a duel. And like this, the people of Quraysh came out and they said, who is there to challenge us? And they said, we will only fight with people from our own clan, from our own family. So there were small skirmishes, and some of the Muslims, they got injured in this, and some of the non-Muslims also, they fell in this. And like this, gradually, slowly, then the groups got larger and larger, and then it turned into a full-fledged battle. When the battle started, Sahaba radiallahu anhum say that we went in with sticks and staffs, but we saw that once we started waving them, they turned into swords in our hands. And Sahaba say that before we could lift them and strike, before we would raise them and strike the enemy, he would already fall, and we couldn't figure it out. One Sahabi says that in the thick of battle, I faced off with someone, and they turned around, they started running. Before I could catch up to them, someone came and slit the body into half, and the person fell. I came back to Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. I said, oh Prophet, well, this is what happened. No one hit him. He said, don't worry, that's Jibreel alayhi salam with his angels. They're fighting on you. They're fighting on your behalf. This is not your doing. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says this in the Quran. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commanded the angels that go and support the believers, go and strengthen the believers. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asked the Muslims, so how many would you like? How many angels would you like? If you want, أَنِّي مُمِدُّكُمْ بِأَلْفٍ مِّنَ الْمَلَائِكَةِ مُرْدِفِينَ. If you want, I can send 1,000, and there will be more coming after that 1,000. And various promises were mentioned in the Quran, 3,000 and 5,000. In fact, the Quran said that if they come to you all at once, if they were to attack you all at once, there are 5,000 angels waiting to come and defend you right now. But those 5,000 angels were not needed. But this is what they saw. People who were watching this from a distance reported and later accepted Islam, that we heard this thundering sound from above the sky, and someone was saying, "Aqbil hayzoom, aqbil hayzoom," and it was a very frightening sound. In fact, it was so frightening that one of the people that was observing, he got so overwhelmed that he died there. After the battle, they went back, and when they recounted this to Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he told them that was Jibreel alayhi salam with his horse, and the angels, they were descending from the heavens at that time. You heard their voices. So this was the place where Abu Jahl fell, and many of the great chieftains, the powerful chieftains of Quraysh fell. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave victory to these 313 over the 1,000. 70 of them were killed, 70 of their main people were killed, 70 of them were taken as prisoner, and the Muslims were victorious. Now, something very interesting aside from all of this happened, because Iblis does his work. He does it in the form of putting thoughts into the minds of people, and he also uses people to convey his message. He makes people his agents to convey his propaganda, his message, and to incite people. So this is where the Quran talks about shayateen being in the form of jinns and shayateen being in the form of human beings. These are human beings that shaitan is using for his purpose. That person themselves might not even know what they're doing. So in this case, Iblis, he had come in the form of one of the chieftains and rounded people up and said, we are supporting you, and this is going to happen and that's going to happen. But when he saw in the battlefield that, oh, Jibreel is here with all these angels, then he ran. He ran. And he said, look, I have to go. Inni ara ma la tarawna inni akhafullah. I have nothing to do with you. Right now I'm seeing things that you people cannot see. And he was in a human form. He was in the form of these supporting tribes that were supposedly there to help and assist. And he ran. He ran towards the seaside. And he jumped into the water, and before he jumped into the water, he said, oh Allah, I'm just asking you one thing. Remember that promise that you gave me when you released me into the world. What was that? إِنَّكَ مِنَ الْمُنظَرِينَ إِلَىٰ يَوْمِ الْوَقْتِ الْمَعْلُومِ. I'm not going to destroy you yet. I'm giving you time till Qiyamah. He said, oh Allah, don't destroy me yet. So Iblis was afraid for his life, and he ran. Now this was a decisive victory for the Muslims. And then further discussions happen as to what to do now, what to do with the spoils of the war, what to do with the prisoners, and so on and so forth. But here, I would like to just mention a few things in closing. I have said before that jihad is the system of defense that Islam has implemented. And that jihad it's an institution that is governed by very strict rules. There are rules to it, just like there are rules and laws, in fact layers of laws at various levels that will ensure that that institution is only used for what it has been created. It is only used for the benefit for those for whom it's been created, and it's never allowed to fall into the hands of the wrong people. The laws around it will govern it, just like the laws around defense are structured in any state or country. So the Quran has not given the Muslims some mandate to go and kill the non-Muslims, or as the popular wording is, to go and kill the infidels, even though the word infidel is not from Islam. It's not an Islamic term. This is a term that has been borrowed from biblical texts. So there is no such mandate in Islam. If that was the mandate, then the Prophet ﷺ would have declared war in Mecca at the time when the Muslims were being the most persecuted. But at that time, for 13 years, he persevered and he was patient. In fact, he allowed his companions to go and migrate to a non-Muslim land and live there as refugees or under the asylum of that land. In Medina, and after Islam started to spread, the people, the non-Muslims that they were interacting with were of different kinds, of different categories. They're not all the same, and the Quran does not treat them all the same. There were those that were living peacefully in Medina with them. There was no command to go and attack them, because this would have been then the second opportunity after Makkah, that, oh, well, now you have the state, you have the power, so all of these non-Muslims, either force them to convert or kill them. It would have been so easy. But there was no such thing. In fact, a treaty was formed of how they're going to live. There were those who lived amicably and peacefully with them. There were those that were openly at war with them. There were those who entered into peace treaties with them. And from those, there were some who broke the peace treaty, and there were others who maintained the peace treaty. And then there were those who did not enter into any peace treaty. Okay? So these are different kinds of people living at that time. This is very important to understand. A person who does not understand this basic thing will never understand the verses of jihad. Which is pertaining to whom? You know, when we say that people are taking the verses of jihad out of context, the problem is even Muslims don't know the context. We ourselves don't know. That what is the context of? We just say, oh yeah, no, it's in another context. But what is the context? So I'm giving you some basic ground rules. That there were different kinds of people, and there will always be different kinds of people. So jihad is not something that is done just because someone is a non-Muslim. This is not how it is structured. The verses of jihad in the Quran, there are those which talk about making treaties, upholding treaties, abiding by treaties. There are those verses that talk about people who have backed out after making a treaty, they have backed out, they have broken the terms of that treaty. In those cases, then there are also two options. One is that you say, okay, fine, this treaty is over, now we will create another set of terms and conditions. Or this treaty is over, you have breached it by attacking us, now we need to defend ourselves. You will find all of these situations, all of these circumstances taking place in the Quran. When the Treaty of Hudaybiyah was signed, now look, Hudaybiyah took place 6 years into Hijrah. So if there was by now some kind of a mandate to go and kill the kuffar, then this was an opportune time. Let's go into Makkah and let's kill them. But they went as pilgrims. And when the Muslims were attacked, a lot of people don't know this. People know that the Muslims were stopped. But Muslims that were coming and encamped at Tan'im, probably 100 or so Sahaba were massacred there. So they were attacked. The Prophet ﷺ was in a state of extreme grievance. He was very upset. He was very hurt. And even in that state, he told their spokesperson that I am going to offer you a peace treaty. If you accept it, then fine. Otherwise, if you are going to do this, if you're going to come and attack us, we who are coming as peaceful pilgrims, after everything you've done to us, we're coming here as peaceful visitors, you're still going to attack us, then if you are not ready to make a peace treaty, then it's going to be war, and then you will not be able to survive that war. So initially the response was one of arrogance. They said, no, we don't need to make a peace treaty with you. But then they went back and they said, whoa, wait a minute, let's reflect on this a little bit. Let's make some kind of a treaty. Treaty was signed. It was not comfortable for Muslims. Many of the terms were not in favor of the Muslims. But the Prophet ﷺ, just to maintain the peace, agreed to those terms. Otherwise, if you look at the terms of that treaty, anyone who defected from the Muslim side to Makkah, then what would happen? The Meccans would not return him. But if someone from Makkah defected over to the Muslim side, the Muslims would have to return him. It was one-sided. And the Muslims are not allowed to perform Umrah this year, not allowed to enter Makkah this year, they have to go back. So all of these stringent terms, the Prophet ﷺ upheld it, even though it was not favorable, only for one reason, that was to maintain peace. And what happened after that? They did not abide by their terms. There was a ceasefire. There was supposed to be a ceasefire in place for 10 years. And no party is going to carry out any act of aggression against the other. But the people of Quraysh, the people of Makkah went and attacked a group of people who were camped by a riverside or by a lakeside. They were sleeping, they attacked them in their sleep and they massacred them. Who were they? These were people who had allied with the Muslims. They weren't Muslims themselves. They were not Muslims themselves, but they had become allies with Muslims. They were in the peace treaty with Muslims. When they did this, the Prophet ﷺ said, look, this needs to be repaired. You have taken lives, you have killed people. So I'm giving you some options. Either you pay the blood money for all of those lives that were lost. You compensate their families. Or you hold those people responsible. If you say that, no, this was not us as a group, it was some people that went and did this, you will hold them responsible and punish them. Or the third option is, we end this treaty right now. So they, again, in an act of arrogance, they said, we want to end the treaty. It's over, it's done. The Prophet ﷺ said, okay, that's your choice. Then he said, okay, we're going to Makkah now. The treaty is over. Now we're going to go and we're going to take Makkah. We're going to conquer Makkah. So it is very important to understand the inner workings of what happened at the time of Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. It's very important. There are two extremes of people today. Both are completely wrong. There are those who say jihad is an obligation in which every Muslim must take up arms against non-Muslims and kill them and fight them. Irrespective of where they're living, irrespective of what the conditions are, they must take arms and go and kill them. And some of them are so foolish that they will suggest that, oh, even if you can't come and join some supposed Muslim army, then kill kuffar wherever you are. This is the terrorist element. These are people who have taken these teachings, this institution, and have completely perverted it. That's one extreme. And their way of looking at the world is just this: it's us against them. It's us against everyone. Everyone's our enemy. And even most of the Muslims are our enemy. Most of the Muslims are not even proper Muslims. And that's it. It's just a life of war. This is one extreme. The other extreme is the one that says there is no such thing as jihad with the sword. And when they have discussions amongst themselves or with non-Muslims, they try to put it aside like it doesn't even exist. No, that was just under those times, and there's no such thing anymore. So these types of apologists do not do anything for Islam, because the non-Muslims are not so foolish, they're not so illiterate that they can't go and read for themselves. You tell them this today, tomorrow they're going to go and conduct their own research, and they're going to say, oh, they lied to us. So both groups are wrong. They're both at extremes. Those that are trying to overly please their people, and then there are those who have this anger and this rage where they want to hurt everyone, and they're so exclusive that they want to exclude even the Muslims from Islam. But the matter is actually settled and decided in the light of ilm, in the light of those interpretations of Quran that have always been adopted in Islamic tradition. These are not new interpretations. These are simply those that have always been accepted and agreed upon by the Muslims. So these are some aspects that relate to Surah Al-Anfal, and then after that, Surah At-Tawbah. I mentioned that surahs are paired, and some surahs are completions or continuations or sequels of others. So Surah Tawbah is, you can say, a sequel or a continuation of Surah Al-Anfal. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala enable us to take lessons that will benefit us from His book and enable us to understand and apply His book. Wa sallallahu wa sallam wa baraka ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'in.